Top of the morning, Dan, on the Hill. You had Sundar Pichai from Google. You had your Jeff Bezos from Amazon. You had your Mark Zuckerberg. And Jim Jordan had a message for those big tech CEOs. Jack Dorsey from Twitter, notably absent.
I'll just cut to the chase. Big tech's out to get conservatives. That's not a suspicion. That's not a hunch. That's a fact. July 20th, 2020, Google removes the homepages of Breitbart and the Daily Caller. Just last night, we learned Google has censored Breitbart so much traffic has declined 99%. June 16th, 2020, Google threatens to demonetize and ban the Federalist. April 19th, 2020, Google and YouTube announce a policy censoring the content that conflicts with recommendations of the World Health Organization. Now think about that. The World Health Organization, the organization that lied to us, the organization that shilled for China. And if you contradict something they say, they can say whatever they want. They can lie for China. They can shill for China. You say something against them, you get censored.
Yeah, and that continues, particularly in the COVID-19 space. It's not just they're out to get conservatives. They're also out to advance the left's party line, whatever that may be, on whatever topic that may be.
And they don't care who they roll over in the process.
And so we had Trump social media posts taken down yesterday that talk about how unlikely it is for children, for young people, for students, in the context of school reopenings, to be infected, much less to be seriously ill if they are infected with COVID-19.
Yeah, he said that children are almost immune.
Which is true. Immune in the sense that there is very limited incidence of fatality. The incidence of fatality among school-age kids is something like the incidence of fatality among the same age group of being struck by lightning.
Oh, and by the way, just yesterday, Pritzker and his IDPH director, they took back 100 COVID deaths that they said were COVID deaths, including a teenager from the northwest suburbs that they, hair was on fire, that he had COVID. He did not.
You also have social media platforms censoring out or taking down conversations from practitioners even. Forget Donald Trump Jr., forget the politicians. Actual practitioners, medical doctors talking about therapeutics, potential therapeutics, that have been approved for emergency use for COVID-19, like hydroxychloroquine. Why? Because Trump has promoted it.
Well, Trump takes it on a daily basis, and that's a choice that he made with his doctor.
Past tense. And so where are we with big tech and the suppression not just of political speech, but of scientific speech, not just from politicians, but from actual medical professionals and public health professionals? For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Liam Deacon, Brexit Party's former comm director. Liam, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Joining you from London.
Great to have you. So you wrote this piece on the topic for Spiked Online, which is an outlet that I'm enjoying more and more as I read it more and more. And so offer your perspective on what you're seeing from big tech, even though they haven't been whistled before your government quite yet.
Yeah, so it sounds like from the segment that you just played that you're well aware of the ongoing problems to do with big tech, increasingly wading in to democratic discussions going online and deciding what is and isn't an acceptable opinion, and anything that is, deemed unacceptable is effectively censored because it's deemed to be hate. But the article that I've written, that's a well-known phenomenon. It's been going on for a while. The article I've written is highlighting the fact that this sort of campaign of censorship has taken a really quite a serious and dark turn during the coronavirus crisis, whereby the tech companies have moved from censoring just social and political point of views to actually intervening in scientific debates as well. This is a big step that I don't think really has been considered. So we've seen a whole series of scientists who have actually been shut down. There's a very famous British scientist called Kyle Sicaro who has been removed. Kurt Windikowski was some of his stuff was removed, and then there were two British journalists, one called Peter Hitchens and one called Toby Young. All of these people have basically been advancing what I would call COVID skeptical points of view, across a range of areas. And they were variously either shadow banned, completely removed, or removed and then reinstated. And I think what the people who are supporting this censorship really have failed to understand is how the scientific method works. And this is what the article was about, that some of the most important scientific breakthroughs of our time have come from people who were at one point or another considered wacky or in a minority. In the article, I mentioned that Copernicus was considered crazy when he proposed that it was the Earth going around the sun instead of the sun going the Earth, or the other way around even. Excuse me. And that even Einstein himself was considered completely mental when he put forward the theory of relativity, and that even if these people that are, even Trump, if he's wrong about this drug that he's been taking, even if he's completely wrong about it, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to take a definitive view on that either way. But even if he's wrong about it, a YouTube monitor or Jack Dorsey at the top of Twitter has no right in a Western society to shut down a legitimate point of view on a scientific topic, and that actually the Twitter might argue that Trump is promoting a false narrative that will cause people to believe false things. But it is more dangerous to have a situation where, only certain views are sanctioned, because because of the examples I just spoke about, sometimes those minority views turn out to be correct. And even if they don't turn out to be correct, they strengthen sort of a democratic debate that goes on within the scientific community. And it's all about having a free and open society and a right to be wrong. Okay, and if the tech companies remove our right to be wrong and our right to inquire and give our opinions opposite, we take a very dark turn towards a society like China's, where only certain opinions are allowed to be spoken. Now, you may say that these are private companies, private tech companies, and so what if they decide what can and can't be said on their platforms? You can go elsewhere and take your opinions elsewhere. That's another consequence of living in a free society, that private companies have a right to decide who can use their service. That's a fair point. I hear that point. But the problem with that is that the tech companies have a monopoly over certain markets. They have a complete monopoly over global online discourse, okay? Between Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, they have a complete monopoly over global online discourse. And these companies are essentially run by 4 or 5 liberally minded, Californian-based CEOs, okay? And it is not an acceptable situation where 5 liberally minded people get to essentially control and mediate global scientific discourse, because it could equally be as wrong as Trump is about these issues and could skew open inquiry and essentially shut down, what potentially could be a huge scientific breakthrough. That is not an acceptable point of view. Sorry, carry on.
In this country, there's hearings on potential and a look at potentially pursuing an antitrust prosecution against one or more of these companies. There's arguments that are being made from both political parties to break up some of these companies. What's the conversation like in England based on some of the points that you're raising, as well as also concerns of market concentration, as you were describing?
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned that. Just 2 weeks ago, a body in the United Kingdom called the Competition and Markets Authority released a very long report into how to basically address these monopolies. And they came up with a very interesting solution, which wasn't I think, too authoritarian. Basically, the idea that they gave was that the data that Google and Facebook holds on all of us should be shared, and that would allow competitors to start up competing services. Because the problem is that you can't start a rival Google because you don't have the huge amount of data to make that service sort of function. And it's a similar problem that's basically all the advertising revenue that Google and Facebook gobble up that should really be going to newspapers and to news outlets is all absorbed by Facebook and Google because they can target ads so accurately because they hold all this data. So basically, the argument is that data should be open sourced. So rival search engines, rival newspapers can use that data. Now, there's a debate going on whether or not that compromises the sort of the intellectual property rights of those private companies. But I think the counter argument to that would be that, data is not like an everyday commodity. Data is something that a lot of us gave to these companies, not realizing how precious and how valuable that commodity is. And is it really their product now? Do they own our data? And that's a very important question that I think Western societies need to deal with going forward. Who owns our data? Do we own that data, or does Google and Facebook own that data? So I think that's one question that we need to consider. I'm not going to pretend to have the answer to that question. It's a very complicated question, how we address these monopolies. The European Union has floated the idea of actually breaking up Google or its European subsidiary, which is based in Ireland. I think that is wrong. I don't think a government organization really should be breaking up successful companies in that kind of way. But I do think we need to think critically about this, especially for you guys in America with your election coming up this year. As you mentioned, Google has been found very, very clearly altering the search results in certain topics. I mean, in this country, we have a newspaper called The Guardian. It's very left-leaning. And you can search some topics, and all of the top search results will be, articles from this one newspaper. And this newspaper is selling hardly any papers. And, I think it's clear to me, at least, that Google alone is keeping this one left-leaning newspaper essentially alive. It's directing a huge amount of traffic to that. Is that right? I don't know. Is that an acceptable point of view? And I think that the only solution to this is to have more competitors to Google and Facebook with a diverse range of political outlooks and leanings. And so the only thing that I can say to your readers is that if you don't like this settlement, if you feel uneasy about the control that big tech has over science, as I wrote, but also politics, you should start using alternative services. There's a few that I can name now. There's one called DuckDuckGo, which is a search engine that's there to use. Bing, Microsoft alternative to Google. I use that sometimes, and I find actually I get more impartial results through Bing than I do from Google in political results. And there's obviously that new alternative to Twitter, which I know has been more successful in the US than it has been here in England, called Parler. So it's up to you, the consumer, really, to reach out and start using different services, I think. And that would be really the best solution to this, is that the government doesn't have to intervene in the market. The market corrects itself, and us consumers lead the way by actually moving to services that we think are fairer and better.
He is Liam Deacon. He's Brexit Party's former head of press. His piece in Spiked Online, Big Tech is Suppressing Science. I will tweet out at Dan Proft. Liam, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights, and you raise a lot of good questions.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Folks, when shopping for a home mortgage, how much is great service, low closing costs, and competitive interest rates worth to you? At Townstone Financial, it's priceless. Hi, Barry Sterner, founder of Townstone Financial. Let's hear about the Townstone experience from one of our customers.
My name is Demi, and I did my first home purchase with Townstone Financial. The biggest difference between Townstone and the bigger banks that we went to was that at Townstone, Barry was really straightforward. He ran the numbers, and he made it happen. With the bigger banks, I feel like they kept giving me a runaround. We didn't have a lot